Hello, and welcome to this weekend's live stream. Just adjust that. All right, it is a warm and muggy day here in Northern Virginia, and so it's nice to be inside. Got a little bit of cloud cover, not too bad. Today we're going to be tying a fly out of Kelson. So not from Price Santa today, which I think will be a nice way to mix it up. What else? Just a few announcements. If you enjoy seeing what I do and want to see more of my work, you can head on over to my Instagram. It's at justwondering.brad. And if you want to support the channel or purchase any of the flies that you've seen me tie, you can head over to my Etsy shop, Studio 1213. Other than that, just a reminder that we've kind of been on this slow burn to 500 followers on Instagram. And when I hit 500 followers, I'm going to do a giveaway. Just a whole bunch of fishing flies that I've tied, a couple of surprises, maybe a salmon fly or two. Who knows? But when I hit 500 followers on Instagram, I'll give that away. All right. So today we're gonna do a two-part fly again, like we've done in the past, and today we're gonna tie the body for the bone bouche. It is the way it's written out. It's tempting to call it the bonnie bouche, but it's the bone bouche. It's actually French. I had to look this up, and it's French for tasty morsel, or I think it's literally like good mouthful. But it's makes sense. It's a fly. It should look tasty, like a tasty morsel to a salmon. It's a nice looking fly that I've seen other people tie, and and it features my favorite color in fly tying, which is claret. So that's always good. As you can see, just my standard underbody gut, blind eye gut here. Just the camera down a little bit. See if you can see. And then I've just started my tying thread back here near the butt, or near the tip and tag end, and we'll get started. And today I'm going to be using a combination of... So it's an interesting fly because I'll be able to demonstrate some, the dual rib technique that I use. And I plan on illustrating it. I realize that I have a pretty good teaching aid here with me in the form of a chalkboard. How old school is that? But first, the tip is just gold twist or gold thread. I'm using Legarten gold oval, small, or it's either small or extra small. Fine is what they call it. Tip is gold oval or gold twist, and the tag is yellow silk. And now this has a dubbed body, so I am going to trim everything a little bit short. I'm not going to worry too much about making too many lumps and bumps underneath in the body because it is a dubbed body. But I don't want to build up too much bulk because if you get too much bulk, even through it'll show through even on a dubbed body. So you don't have to worry about smoothness, but you should worry about bulk regardless. A little bit of JEC yellow silk. I believe this is marigold. It's number 318. I think I would prefer something a little bit darker, a little bit more robust color-wise. But this is what I've got. I am not entirely certain the actual hue. Oops. Didn't get that button down quite as well as I wanted. I'm not entirely certain the precise hue matters, no matter what it is you're tying. You have to think that in ye olden days, they didn't really have great control over, what color things came out of the dye vat. They had better control. I think there are kind of two thoughts about it. They had better control over their dyed materials than we tend to think they did, but they didn't have as good a ability to do like exact color matches like we tend to have today. So I think for us as people who tie, reproductions, and I would argue that these are reproductions rather than replicas. For those of us who are tying these reproductions, we tend to be very concerned about what hue it is, whether it's 318 versus 319 on the JEC scale, and I don't think that's necessary, or as necessary as we think it is. You have to think that when these flies were being invented, they were tying just with whatever they could get their hands on, and yellow could be any manner of yellow. It might be a tad large. This is this is a quick sidebar about this tail. This tail I have here, this crest for the tail, is recycled. One of the things that I try to do is if I tie a fly that I'm not 100% satisfied with, I do take the X-Acto knife and I will cut it up. But I try to salvage as much of the materials off a recycled fly as possible. It's just it's good practice. It's efficient use of materials. It's eco-friendly. It's financially friendly because I don't have to keep buying stuff. So yeah, so I tend to recycle flies and parts of flies whenever possible. Okay, sidebar done. Right, so I don't feel like color matching is quite as important. It's I think it's more important today than it was in the past. All right, so the tail is veiled with a little bit of galena or guinea, spotted guinea. And then the butt is just a little bit of red wool. And instead of using wool, I'm going to use, as usual, mohair because I can dub that on and have a little bit more control over the size and shape of the butt. Right. The so if you're if your yellow silk isn't quite the right color or gold, or if your claret's maybe a little bit lighter than a proper claret, that's fine. It doesn't matter. And also, the thing to keep in mind too is that you might use the same color dye on two different materials, and the way that seal will take dye is totally different than the way a chicken neck hackle will take dye. And there are techniques and there are ways to color match those two things. But like I said, back in the day, they probably just rolled with whatever they could get their hands on. So that's just something to keep in mind when if you're looking for materials. It's not necessarily wrong to have two claret things, two claret colors, shades that don't quite match each other. That's okay. Right, so I'm just going to dub on my mohair butt. And I need a little bit more. And this, I do want a little bit more volume to this particular butt because the rest of the body is going to be dubbed, and so it's easier for the butt, particularly if it's a wool butt or if it's a dubbed mohair butt such as this, to get lost compared to the rest of the body. Just going to trim up some of the fibers because mohair is kind of this long fibered stuff. So when you get extra stragglers, they tend to be extra long. Just going to trim that up a little bit just so it's a little bit neater. All right, so now this fly has two ribs, and they are a kind of gold. I'm using a medium flat gold tinsel. Again, this is Lagarten. And then silver lace. And I don't have any Lagarten silver lace because I don't think they make a silver lace, but I've got this antique silver lace. And the principle, and I've described this before, but I think I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in detail today. The principle is there's a mnemonic, well, sort of a mnemonic, first on, last down. And essentially what that is if you're tying two ribs onto the fly, the thing that you're going to wrap last, or the second rib, you tie on first. And I've drawn the schematic, and I think it's going to show up backwards in the camera. But I've got this chalkboard that I haven't used. And essentially, so if I'm looking down the shank of the hook from the blind eye end, I'm looking at it here. And this is the direction in which I'm wrapping my thread. So since I'm right-handed, I'm wrapping the thread up and over away from me. And if you think of the top of the hook as being like 12 o'clock and the bottom of the hook as being like 6 o'clock, right? That might actually be backwards. That might not actually be helpful. Anyway, um, as I tie on the first rib, I'm going to tie it on closest to 6 o'clock. So the first rib would go, for me, right there. And then the second rib, which is going to be a flat tinsel, would go closer to 9 o'clock. I'm just going to represent it by a little rectangle. So that's the order and position in which I will tie on the rib, the two ribs. But I will wrap the thing that I tie on second, so the gold flat tinsel. I will tie that. I will wrap that first. And this way, what happens, what this does, is it ensures that when you start wrapping your rib, you don't cross your ribs. So you don't have to. What's the best way to describe it? You don't have to. Try to wrap one rib on top of the other to get it started. Essentially, they're already positioned in the order in which they're going to go down the hook. All right, so that's one. And now I'm going to tie. So I tied the silver lace closest to the 6 o'clock position. I usually tie it in like a 6 o'clock or sorry, 6:30 or 7 o'clock position because of the way in which I wrap. Just because when you start wrapping a rib, it tends to it tends not to start exactly where you tie it in. So, like if you tie it in at the 6 o'clock, well, it might actually start to become visible on the body or emerge from, that the tie-in point. Oops. At around 5:30. Sorry, I'm messing with the spool of tinsel here. I need some tape. That'll be fine. So yeah, so if you tie in the rib at like 6:30 or 7, it will emerge or become visible at 6. Again, we're talking about faces of clock with 12 being the top, and then rotating around 6 on the bottom, and so on. So we're just going to bind the ribs down, length of the body. And again, I'm keeping the underbody smooth, but it doesn't have to be perfect because I am dubbing. The body is dubbed on top. Okay. Now I'm going to wax my thread as usual. Again, waxing your tying thread and putting a layer of waxed thread on top of the underbody, but underneath a dubbed body, helps to essentially create another layer of wax to which the dubbing can stick. Now the first body section is a yellow dyed seal, and got this very nice marigold colored seal. But it says a third. I'm actually going to do maybe about a quarter to start with, and we'll see. The hackle, it says from the body hackle is a claret body hackle, and it's described as being from the yellow fur. Now I interpret that to mean it does not cover the yellow. However, my normal MO is to start the hackle at the second turn of rib. And so part of the hackle will cover the yellow. I like that look, or I imagine that I will like that look a little bit better. I like the contrast of having the dark hackle over the yellow. Oops. Nuts. Man, it's been a long time since I've snapped my tying thread. I don't. That didn't actually feel like it snapped. It felt like it was cut on something. I don't know if I nicked it on the barb. This is a 70 denier ultra thread, so it's pretty skinny. But yeah, man. So anyway, there are a couple ways to interpret, over or that is the tying thread. Like, why is there a bunch of All right. So I'm going to tie in the hackle now, even though I'm not quite done with the yellow, because I think I will like that look a little bit better. And again, this hackle gets tied in about 7 o'clock. Using waxed tying thread, as always, just to keep it from slipping out while I'm tying it down or winding it. And then I think in front of it goes just the smallest addition of yellow seal. Because I don't officially, according to the recipe, the seal is divided into 1/3 yellow, 2/3 claret. So that's what we'll do. More than that. Okay. And then the next, or the rest of the body, the other 2/3 is claret. So I have some very nice dark claret. And again, it's easiest to dub in small sections, particularly on large flies. And that was a question that I think you got asked last week or the week before. You know, how to control dubbing, and the best answer is use a really tacky wax like cobbler's wax or one of the tackier commercial dubbing waxes, and work in small sections. Don't try to dub an entire body all at once. It's relatively easy to dub a nymph or a dry fly body, size 12. But when you're working with, when you get into the aughts, the 1/0s, the 2/0s, 3/0s, dubbing in multiple sections is definitely easier. All right. A little bit more. Just a few wayward strands. Okay. Now, I'm going to wind the ribs, and because I tied in the gold, flat gold first, or sorry, tied in the flat gold second, I'm going to wind it first. So I'll bring that flat gold up under and in front of the hackle. And tie it off on the back side. Give it fair good wraps because, flat tinsel tends to be a little bit more difficult to tie down just because it's a little bit bulkier in the tie down area, just because it doesn't fold well. Follow that with the silver lace right at the trailing edge of the gold tinsel. And then tie that down. Not a good bind. Okay, and now the hackle, which I'm going to fold on the fly, as usual. Just gently pulling all the fibers to one side. I'm not even really completely folding it. I'm just making sure that when I start to wrap it, none of the fibers are trapped under the stem going forward, because that would be the wrong direction. And then I'm just gently wrapping it so that the stem falls right behind that silver lace. Tying that off. As you can see, I'm using my left hand to wrap my bobbin. It's a good skill to have. Being able to manipulate either materials or your bobbin with, your off tying hand or your non-dominant tying hand. And oftentimes it's just literally just picking it up, placing the thread, and then just letting it fall. Nothing terribly complicated. All right, so the throat is also, like the tail veiling is galena or speckled guinea, and that gets tied in here. Before I do that, however, a few wraps here, wax my thread. Kind of the habit that so you might see me unwrap a whole bunch of wraps on occasion. Part of the habit is, I might use 5 or 6 wraps to tie something down. You really only need about 3. So I've kind of just gotten in the habit of, I don't count my thread wraps. I know there are a lot of people who tie classic salmon flies who will count their thread wraps, and that's not a bad thing, but it's not necessary that it be done. I certainly don't. I just get in the habit of, if I tie something in, then I know that I can safely unwrap, 2 or 3 thread wraps when going to tie it, tie it off or whatever. So it's just something you learn. You can count your thread wraps. Like I said, I know a lot of people who do, but so to fold it, I'm holding it, giving it the stem some tension. I'm just pulling all the fibers to, see? That is why I use wax thread. I actually broke the stem. I didn't pull. So it looks like I pulled out the hackle, but I actually didn't pull out the hackle. I actually broke the stem because that stem gets a little bit thin at the tips. So that's less than ideal, but the wax thread held the hackle just fine. I just snapped the tip. So be a little bit more gentle while folding the hackle the second time. But all I'm doing is I'm giving the stem a little bit of tension, and I'm just pulling all the fibers to one side of the stem before wrapping it. Again, just using my left hand so that my right hand can keep tension on the stem of the hackle. Trim. Bind everything down with a few good wraps. Now, normally, I would change thread to black. I would tie off my white thread here and change to black. However, because this has a red dubbed head, or red wool head, which of course I'm going to use dubbing or mohair. The black thread would show through the red mohair dubbing, and so I am not going to switch thread colors here. Although I am actually, just because we'll do the wing and finish up the fly next week, I am going to tie off my thread here, just so I don't lose this progress. In the good old days, they would have used hack hitches or like super waxed thread, or even a drop of head cement as kind of like a save progress. I'll use a whip finish, but there we go. That's the body of the bonne bouche. little bit of a shorter stream today, but yeah, I wanted to do this fly in two parts because the body has some interesting features, and then the wing will have some interesting features. So yeah, there we go. It's quite an attractive fly already. Um, we'll finish the fly next week with the wing. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Like I said, a little bit of a shorter stream because I know some of my streams have been running over an hour, hour and a half. So a little bit of a shorter one today. And yeah, like I said at the beginning, if you want to see more of my work, go away, motorcycle. Some people don't know when I'm streaming. If you want to see more of my work, check out my Instagram. It's at justwondering.brad. If you want to support the stream or purchase a fly that you've seen me tie, you can check out my Etsy shop. It's Studio1213. Yeah, that's what I've got. And you know, thanks for hanging out. And I will see you next week for finishing the Bonne Bouche. And till then, take care.